Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris and Beverley Ann.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast, episode number 59. And I just said to Bev, I don't like being odd. What did you say, Bev?
Unique. We're never odd. Unique.
Yeah, never odd. Anyway, so because it's an odd, I introduce it, the odd ones apparently. So we are speaking today about, once I've introduced my co-host, of course, who are you?
Hello everyone, I'm Beverley Ann, and it's lovely to be back here again.
So how does our trauma, what we went through and the impact of what we went through affect our parenting? So I just wanted to set the scene a bit, Beverley, if you don't mind. So no one teaches us to be parents, as we know, and we just all assume that we will know what to do. But in reality, our childhood experiences shape our approach to life, and it also shapes our approach to being parents. So if we've gone through things that haven't been good for us as children, we have made the decision that we're not going to parent like our parents parented, maybe. But then others would go, actually, the way that my parents brought me up didn't do me any harm. So therefore, I'm going to carry on their parenting approach. So bearing in mind adverse childhood experiences and those of us that have been physically abused, mentally abused, emotionally neglected, physically neglected, and then we've been sexually abused, some of us. So with all of those different adverse childhood experiences that we encountered, there is also scientific proof that all of these ACEs impact our health, our relationships, and our well-being. And with all of that in mind, today, we want to look at what is it we are doing as parents that may be causing, indirectly or directly, the trauma of our children as well. And what we can do about that once we know what we are doing may be not the right thing. So what can we do differently so that we make sure that our trauma impact is not passed on to our children now and also our grandchildren? So what does that all bring up for you, Bev? Because that's quite a lot there.
It is, but I mean, we've touched on this before in different ways. We've touched on it about pregnancy. We've touched about it bringing children up and how we can go the other way, because it's not all negative, but it can become negative if we're too perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but for me, I think the biggest thing is having an awareness. You know, we've spoken about this. I started my recovery and healing journey after I had my second child. But if I'd have known more about it and become more self-aware beforehand, I'd like to think that I would have prevented some things being passed forward, even in pregnancy, because for me, pregnancy was very triggering and I didn't realise. And as we've heard in other podcasts, that has an impact in itself. But I think this is where, as parents, as you said, we don't get any teaching about it. You can read some books, but I don't learn from books. I learn from doing and talking to other people. And when I think back, you know, even without trauma, parenting is challenging because you're never going to be a 100% perfect parent. And that doesn't mean you're a bad parent, but it goes back to the good enough parenting is good enough, because you can't stop how people interpret things and you can't stop other people's actions happening. So, for instance, with our own children, we can't stop every trauma that they're going to experience. And actually, if we do try and do all of that, then they struggle to be able to self-regulate anyway and go out into their life ahead. But coming back on subjects I don't go off like we can do, I really do believe that having the knowledge and the self-awareness is key. But sadly for some people, their trauma is so big that what they're using to cope, their mechanisms to cope and to regulate, sometimes they're continuing the cycle, but that's not their intention. And they're stuck in their trauma and they just don't know where to start and how to come out of it. You know, I can think of someone at the moment, they've got children, they absolutely love their children. They are stuck big time.
And I just wanted to add in here, we don't know what we don't know, do we? And
No,
it was only when I had a breakdown that I knew that something wasn't right, and I knew that I needed help, but I didn't know what that looked like at the time. And I just know, with all of the knowledge and awareness that I have now that you've alluded to, if there was a leaflet in that prenatal checkup session that said, if you've ever been abused in childhood, you may be impacted in the following ways, I would have picked up that leaflet and I would have got my first bit of education about trauma and its impact and what interventions I would have needed to make sure that I didn't go through that whole 20 years of not understanding, not being able to give my children the best. You know, I really struggled, but I didn't know I was struggling because I didn't know what I didn't know. So for me, if we can bring awareness to this now in this podcast to the professionals that may be involved in that pre and postnatal care, or even before that, the earlier the better, but this is just my thinking right now, then I could have saved myself a lot of angst, a lot of worry, a lot of stress, and certain things turning out the way that they turned out. I could have sawn off all of that and got myself the help and support I needed without the shame and the guilt and the judgment that I put on myself, Bev. I think
absolutely.
it's so important.
And the funny thing is, as you were saying about having that leaflet, I actually thought, oh, that would have scared the life out of me while I was pregnant. But I would have taken it, but I would
Yeah,
have taken it, gone home, put it away, but knowing it was there. It was
yeah,
just because I'd want to look at it a little bit, but not because I wasn't ready then. I knew I was like, it was locked in a box. I'm dealing with this. But when I look back, I wasn't. I mean, I didn't even, I made the decision not to breastfeed my children. It wasn't because I didn't love them, completely not. I
yeah.
was thinking if I reacted when I go to breastfeed them, if I was triggered, because even the thought of it triggered me, I wouldn't want that for my children. But I can totally understand now I'm in the place I am now. I can totally understand if my children were to say, well, you didn't breastfeed me, you didn't give me the best start. But it's having to understand, like as parents, if they're saying it, now I can sit in myself and say, you're right. Do you want to know the answer why? Or, you know, I hear you and I wish it was different rather than like
But
put my, because I would
yeah,
have done that at one time.
but again, going back to that breastfeeding, I heard all of the time, breast is best, breast is best. And that was a trigger for me, but I didn't know what a trigger was. I
No,
didn't know why I was feeling the way that I was feeling. And I think a little bit of knowledge and education at that time would have taken all of that angst away, as I've said. I tried for 3 weeks with the first child, yeah, and I fought it. I battled the shame, the guilt, all of that. It was unnecessary, Bev, if
yeah,
I had that education at the time, okay? And also, with my second one, I chose not to do it because I just couldn't. It was a physical reaction that my body just didn't want to give over to that, because in my brain and my body, it's like it's a sexual act. And of course, it isn't. but that doesn't stop all of this going on. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that awareness needs to be there, Bev.
And also, when I look back now, look at it from the nurses, there was a midwife that wouldn't talk to me on the
Yeah,
ward
because
completely
you didn't
because
do
I
it.
wouldn't breastfeed.
Yeah,
And now, what she didn't realise is I understand now that she knows it's best. She would, she has her
yeah,
beliefs. But for
yeah,
me, that was huge as well. And then she's looking at someone who's had this new baby that's not breastfeeding, but she's put her makeup on. She's got her satin pajamas with her shoulder pads in. She's got
yeah,
her big earrings on. She's doing her hair. And she probably made some harsh judgments. But what she doesn't realise is I believed that rather being a parent, like my parents were, sometimes they were always drunk when I was at home. They were drunk, and sometimes they'd stay in bed all the time because they were out of their heads.
yeah,
I didn't want to be that parent. I wanted to
yeah,
be that parent that was up, dressed, ready for the world, and it was my mask. It was like
yeah,
at that time I had so much darkness and
yeah,
blackness inside me that if someone truly saw the inside, because I
yeah,
was carrying the shame and the guilt
yeah,
of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, being in care, being fostered, all that breaking down, all that judgment, prejudice, that to me, doing all that was meaning, see, I'm a
yeah.
good
I can
mum.
cope. Yeah,
But
yeah. You
now,
would have been judged for that so
oh,
badly.
I can see that. I can
Yeah,
see that. But nobody asked you. But there was
no,
one midwife, and I will say this, one lovely, lovely midwife who saw through all of that. And she
right.
was just amazing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
she's the kind of person it's like, thank you.
yeah. But this is why we need to have these conversations, isn't it? To make sure that the professional understands from a trauma perspective what that person in front of them might be going through, and yet that person that's in front of them might not even know that they're going through it.
Yeah,
That's what we're trying to do here, is bring awareness, but also bring awareness to the parents that what they may be doing is not good for their child, but it's their coping mechanism. But the adult in all of this, when you bring children into the world, we have a responsibility to understand that what we are doing may be having this effect, impact, or this effect, this impact. And if it's our stuff that is causing more harm, then we are responsible for sorting that out, whatever that may be. That is the message that we're trying to bring across in this podcast.
and just coming back to appearance, I'm going to go on appearance at the moment because that was my coping mechanism. I remember when I had my second child, and I won't say anything because of their stories and protection, but I remember when I had my second child, it was a trigger because my other child was becoming the age I was when I was first abused. I didn't realise that was a mirror. I didn't realise it had an impact. And I reached out because I was like, whoa, I've now got two children. How can I protect them? How can I save them? And I did start counselling with a charity that was amazing. And I did become very ill. So they had the impact of me going in hospital. Obviously, emotively, I would have been detached at times. That's not that outwardly I'd think, oh, I'm doing all this, but I look back now and think emotionally I probably wasn't always available to them. That's not that I wanted it to be like that. And
Yeah,
I remember becoming so ill at one time because we were in the deep and nasty, and I didn't have a breakdown then, but I cut all my hair off. And I
right.
remember one of my children being very young and going like that to go to sleep and stroke my hair. But I didn't have any hair. I had like a very short sort of pixie cut. Um, and my son was not happy.
Hmm.
Why have you cut your hair off? And it's funny, isn't it, when we look at it like now and talk like now. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. We can never do everything right.
No, well, because we're human, we're not made to do everything right. We learn,
No.
don't we?
Yeah, and even in, psychological studies, etc., as I said, come back to good enough parenting is good enough. And at the top of my head, I can't think who the psychologist was who did the research I want to say Maslow, but I'm not going to quote any names because in case I get picked up on it. But when I heard that, that really reassured me, because I don't know about you, Chris. I look back and I think, oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd done that. And it
100%.
is really, really hard, isn't it? And that's why talking about this, anyone who's listening, this is not about guilt. And this is, this is about opening up ideas. So if someone's listening and they're thinking, oh, wow, I'm stuck in this cycle. I don't know how to get out of it. And I'm feeling really guilty because I can see that it's hurting my children. You know what? You're a normal person. But my question next would be like, who can you reach out to?
Yeah, and what help do you need?
Yeah.
But it's like, going back to the ACE score, adverse childhood experiences, as a tool, not as a metric to beat people over the head with. Okay. It's the more ACEs you have, the more risk you are for long-term emotional and physical struggles. So even that knowledge allowed me to go, okay, all right, so my past looked like this. This is the impact on me. And if I don't do something different, I can have a shorter life and I can have more mental and physical health struggles. So what can I do to change that? Because I want power and control over the rest of my life and what it looks like and how I feel in all of this. So what can I do to change? The ability to respond, the responsibility, the ability to respond differently. So what is it, or how am I showing up? What am I doing that either brings me a benefit and my children and my family and my friends and my community, brings all of that a benefit, rather than is more destructive? And that is where I go back to, Bev, is that. That's what I ask myself. And yet we've not always got it right. And what I see and experience as abuse, someone else through their eyes might look completely different. So, for example, in different cultures, smacking is not seen as abuse. It's just seen as, that is the discipline. Hitting children with sticks or whatever, the hand, whatever it is, it's not seen as physical abuse in their culture, maybe. That doesn't make it right, especially in the Western world where we have these laws in place, where we are trying to do everything to protect our children and young people. Okay. And what I consider physical abuse might not be someone else's version of that. What I see as emotional neglect may be not what someone or how someone else sees it. So for me, emotional neglect looks like a parent that really doesn't give a monkeys about their child, doesn't support their child, doesn't have anything to do with their education, doesn't spend any time with them, doesn't show them boundaries. Yeah, all of that for me is emotional support and building. Yeah. Now, if a parent can't be in someone's life because they're out working all of the time, yet they've still got another parent providing all of this, to me, that is not emotional neglect. But to a child and young person who may not see one of their parents for whatever reason, they may see that as that. And who am I to say that that is not right for them? I don't agree with it, but who am I to say that is not right? So part of this conversation that we're having today is, what is it we are causing ourselves, causing other people, and what can we do to put it right for ourselves and for those people in our lives?
And I want to come back to a few things that you've said there. So I remember when I first saw ACEs, and it was put forward as a scoring sheet back then, and I see it as a conversation tool to open. And I will say, where they say 4 or more, I remember someone saying, oh, I've only got a score of 1. But when they unravelled it, well, they were off the chart. And that's very normal too. But what I wanted to say was, when I saw that information, I remember sitting there and it coming up on the screen, and there was a bit of anger that actually came up. And it was like, how dare you? How dare you? And I took it initially, and that's the self-defense, that's the survival, that's being triggered. It was like, how dare you? I've gone through all of that. I can clock off these aces. I've gone through all of that. And you're now telling me that I'm going to live, it could impact me by taking 20 years away from my life, that I'm going to be all these things and illnesses.
And I'm not going to amount to anything.
And that, for me, was a trigger, because
100%.
being brought up in the care system as well, I was never going to amount to. For me, it was like, and who says? So that gave me the impetus, like, no, I want to find out more about this. And actually, don't tell me I'm going to be a bad parent, because I'm doing everything I can. I'm nearly swore then. I'm doing everything I can.
To be different and do different.
To change parenting from what I learned. And now you're telling me this? No way. And so that's really what, led me here as well, because it was like, no, that's not me. And then there are some things that, as you were talking, came to mind. Family dynamics. Because, as we said in another podcast, our children are growing up within a family, and this is biological, and it came out of the ICSA report. The majority, not all, but the majority of women's abuse happens within the family. Now, we're not going to take that away from anyone who's been raped, abused outside of the house, but the majority is women within the family. And as we know, boys, it can happen in the family, but it tends to, especially the large majority in the report, came out through institutions, and we understand why on that report and that research. However, the worst thing about family dynamics is you're trying to change things for your family, but they may be going against your bigger family that's around you. And so in my incidents, I remember being in a relationship, and thinking, do I want my children growing up thinking that this is the right way to behave in relationships? But I didn't have parents behind me or a family to support me in that. So when I did make my decision to go, for whatever reason, that was hugely triggering and challenging, on top of the ACE, because I was being accused of being a really bad mum. And all my history now that I trusted information was being used against me. And as a survivor of, all those abuses, that is really, really triggering. And I'm not saying my husband did all those abuses against me, but it was an abusive relationship. And that's something, again, that's another layer of guilt we have sometimes when we've had all this trauma behind us, is the relationships we get into when we're younger sometimes.
And again, you clearly saw your relationship as abusive, because that's how you experienced it.
Not at first.
Okay. But your children may not have seen it through the same lens, because you protected them to such an extent that they didn't get to see what you came to see.
Absolutely. And I've had to really dig deep on many occasions and really look at myself. And even, in therapy, etc., when it's like, what would you change? Oh, I'd change not losing my temper on my son's birthday because I was frustrated because I was trying to do his PlayStation. He doesn't remember that. We had a conversation about it. He doesn't remember it, but I do. But some things I would never change. They were too young to know things, and I'm glad they don't know things. And even to this day, even though they're adults, if they ever ask questions, I'd answer them honestly. But I do believe that, one of the things I try to protect for my children is that they had a relationship with both parents. Because I didn't have that with either one of my parents.
Yeah.
And sadly, all I'm going to say is that's been very, very challenging, and
Yeah.
it's fired back at me. So we're
Yeah.
not talking about this saying, oh, if you do steps 1, 2, and 3, you'll skip along the
Because
yellow
there
brick
isn't.
road.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want people to be very aware that sometimes you feel like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
most important thing I can take from this is, as I can only speak in my own journey, by looking at myself, going through my own healing, recovery, and continuing. That's why we do what we do. I lead as an example to my children, and they've got their own families as well. So
And
yeah,
then
that's tough.
it is really tough. And thank you for sharing all of that, because we're trying to be open and honest and
Yeah,
really dig deep. Um, but there are going to be some people that are in together in a relationship who don't see it as abusive, like you didn't see it
I
straight away
didn't.
at the beginning. Um, but equally, when you do realise, then just know that there is help and support to change that, because I'm going to get into the realm now of having social workers involved within your life, maybe because they your child has become on their radar. Maybe they've gone to school, maybe they're not being fed properly, maybe you are a parent that has mental health issues, maybe you've got addictive issues, so maybe the child is turning up to school hungry, neglected, or for whatever reason they've become on the radar of their teachers, and social services are now involved. You may not think that how you're living your life is actually harmful to your children, because you are giving them a lot more than what you ever got, or you feel that you're giving them as much as you can, and that may be true. Two things can be true at the same time, but you still may be not giving your children exactly what they do need. And if you work with social services, as far as I understand, and I know that there are two sides to every story, if you work with social services, and if social services turn around and say to you, your partner is abusive, and if you stay with them, you may end up losing your children. If you stay with them, you need to leave, and you then make the decision to stay, then you might end up losing your children because of that decision. So it's all about shining a light on what's going on and really being honest and open with yourself, and say, this is going on for me, I need help, or actually, this is going on for me, and you need to um, back off, because that is not the truth. Yeah, it's understanding that you've gone through this stuff. There is a trauma impact, and if you need help asking for it, you may not necessarily get it. I know for a fact that my sister asked for help and she didn't get the help that she needed. But where social services are in your life and they're saying to you, this is happening, it's going to have an impact on your children, and if you don't do A, B, and C, we may be taking your children away, then maybe you need to start looking at what you are actually doing and changing that.
And it's the fear that comes in the way. Let's be honest here. So, growing up, I've had 13 social workers in 14 years. So social services to me is not anything unusual. But even in my own family with my own siblings, we all have a different viewpoint. For me,
Yeah,
I'm not saying every single social worker is brilliant, but I'm not saying every single social worker is bad, because I think what they do is a challenging job.
challenging. Yeah,
Absolutely. And they don't make decisions lightly. And what's amazing is when I ended the marriage finally, for valid reasons, obviously that got used against me because I made that decision. However, I stuck by it and I stick by it now. When it impacted one of my children severely in one way, and they also were struggling, and emotionally they were struggling, and it came out in a different way. I was like, no, this is the boundary. I haven't come this far. Even though I didn't know all the answers, I was like, no, these are my boundaries. That was innate in me. But when my son got support, I then said, well, what about me? I need to show my children that, as scary as therapy is, maybe I need some additional support as a parent, because I've been doing myself reflection, but maybe I need to, and I was also being accused of being a bad parent, maybe I need to look into that.
Yeah.
And I actually got a phone call from a social worker who had checked in, and they were very serious about what they were asking me. And at the end, I answered all their questions. And at the end, I said, thank you. And they said, why? I said, thank you for listening to my son. And she was like, wow, I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, no, all children need to be heard.
Yeah.
Now, thank you also for coming and asking my side.
Yeah.
Now you've got the information. And I was confident because I knew he was reacting out of emotion, anger at the time. But that's why I also followed up with parenting classes. And I tell you what, I was scared, but it was the best thing. And I wish they were available for all parents, regardless of whether you recognise your trauma or not.
But Bev, there's going to be some families where they're going to go, well, who are you to tell me how to live my life? Who are you to tell me how to bring up these children? But at the end of the day, we are all legal entities in our own right. So I'm my own legal entity, and my children are their own legal entities. So the state is about looking after or intervening on behalf of someone who's not old enough to protect themselves, even from their own parent. This is my understanding of it, yeah? And it's just like, if you are not providing your children with love, care, nurture, the basics, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And this is not about if you've got money or not. If you haven't got money, but you're still trying to provide for your children in the best way, they're getting the love, care, and nurture. It's not about what you can give them monetarily. It's what you can give them from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically, it's also fair for me to bring in here, if you are a social worker or a professional and you can clearly see that a family is struggling, not through no means, their own fault, but it's just they haven't got money. They maybe not have a roof over their head, so they're homeless for some reason and they're sitting in a homeless unit, for example. It's to go in there and actually say, I see you're doing a really good job in the worst circumstances possible. How can we help you more? How can we give you the support that you need to help your children? So I think it's really important that social workers, even if they see a family struggling, so say like mum's got a drink problem, why is it you're drinking? What has happened to you to make you do what it is you're doing? Because I need to have this conversation with you, because if you carry on drinking, this is the impact not only on you, but on your family. So what is it I can do to help you? Is it past stuff that has come up, hit you in the face, and you're now using that as a coping mechanism? So all the professionals, Bev, that deal with families, in my opinion, they need this trauma-informed lens. And if the parent then goes, oh my God, yes, I'm struggling, and yes, this is my coping mechanism, and yes, please can I have that help and support, it helps everyone, and the judgment takes away. But equally, if that professional then turn around and go, get off the alcohol, you're not a good mum, you're not doing right by your children, that is just gonna exacerbate how that person is feeling, and it's going to make them go the other way and not get the help and support they need. But equally, if they then choose not to do anything about it, that is where I struggle, and I say, you have got the responsibility now for your children to change, because we pointed out the issue and we want to work with you. I think this is where it's all got to change.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing, I mean, you can see I was on the edge of my seat. I want to get in. I want to get in. It takes a village to raise a child because, you know, I'm back in social care now in a different way with young teenagers and young people. And the best part of that is being part of a team so that, you know, it helps the young people to be able to, you know, self-regulate and learn all about that. And we do it in different ways. But I've also got even more of an insight is, yeah, I don't agree that every social worker works really well. And if you've got, if you're a family and at the moment you've got a social worker you're involved in with, and you're not gelling, then ask for a different one. You know, it's like counsellors, you can't get on with everyone. I know out of my 13, there are some that were memorable because they were really good, and there's some that were memorable because they weren't really good. And I didn't, as a child and young person, I didn't feel heard and I didn't feel represented. Whereas the ones that were good did all that, and they became my voice, which was fantastic. So I advocate for a social care system. But the biggest challenge is when we're faced with parents, and this is not finger pointing, but it's fact, that really don't know that what they're doing has an impact. And they are
100%.
so far down the line that when somebody like social services turns up and maybe even wants to support them, because they have family social workers now that will help support, but they just don't see it and they're not there.
No.
And that there's nothing more heartbreaking and frustrating than seeing and witnessing someone who is on a self-destruct pathway, because that's the only way they know how to cope with their emotions, and it impacts their children. And then what happens is the children have to be taken to try and give, but that just adds another layer. And it's like, well, we can't not support the children because the trauma carries on.
100%.
So being trauma informed, I can't tell you, you know, even this week in a conversation, there's somebody that we both know, we're not going to say anything, and they've done really, really, really well. Oh no, actually we can say something because they've been a guest on our podcast. And for anyone who wants to listen, go back to Pauline's story.
Okay.
And Pauline has had some fantastic news. And she was very emotional, and she's achieved something that she'd always dreamt of, but never thought she could do it. And she'd got a qualification. And she reflected back and said, I'll never forget the nurse when I had my breakdown. There was just one nurse who just sat quietly and said, what happened to you?
Mm-hmm.
That's all they said. And yeah, it wasn't a straight line to recovery. There were huge bumps in the road for them, but to see where they are now, it's like amazing. And that's how simple. And sometimes as social workers, I know, because I'm involved with conversations like most days now, when you've got someone that, you know, I look at my parents, alcoholics, God knows, I mean, they were so chaotic. I'm not going to go into it. They didn't want to hear.
No. And I think that is when the professionals do have a duty of care to really step in and do the best and what's right by the child and children, because that is breaking the cycle so that doesn't go on. But at the same time, I think if you are a professional and you see someone with a coping mechanism who doesn't have the education and awareness that we've alluded to throughout this podcast, because we didn't have it until we had it, and we desperately wanted to do different when we knew different, but where there is education awareness that's taken on board by survivors who are struggling, enable them, let them grow, let them, you know, have that help and support and interventions and be part of that journey, because there is nothing better when a professional and a family come together and work together and grow and everybody what's the word benefits from that, because it's the child that benefits from that healthy relationship between the professional and the parent. Once you've helped them over the obstacles and learn, show them that life is not just about surviving, it is about thriving, and they can do things in a different way.
And it's okay to make mistakes at times. That's how we learn.
Well, we all make mistakes, don't we?
The person who never made a mistake has never learnt a thing. You read any self-help book, you read any biography of people, we look at them now in, they're successful in whatever term you feel is successful, and they'll be open about the mistakes they made along the way, but they learnt from it. And when a person is in that place, we've been we've cherished it, we've wanted it, we've dug deep, and we continue to dig deep personally and go inside. There's nothing better. I feel rich. It's not about the money, I'm not rich in money, but I feel rich in life. I have to put up my hand sometimes and go, you know what, if I've hurt you, for that I apologize for, because, as a human being, because, to my children, that I never intended to do. However, as a parent, I made the best decisions at that time with the knowledge and the place that I was at. And I've said it for years to my children. Then there came a time when they're old enough to say, right, well, that's it now, because I've said sorry enough. And also we have to be careful, because that sorry sometimes gets taken as like, well, it was all your fault. It's like, well, hold on a minute. I'll take responsibility for me, but not for everyone.
I think when individuals come to that mature age where their brain actually understands and sees it's not all black and white, there's two sides to a story or a lived experience, and also where you're coming from and what you had to deal with, then you can come to a more of a mutual understanding, and you move on together, or you don't, because not everything gets sorted, does it, in life?
No, it's reality.
But my message here, Bev, at this stage in this podcast is, just because we don't see something as abusive or harmful, it may be to that person within our lives, they see it differently, and we do not have the right. We can challenge it, of course we can, but I don't think we have the right to say that they can't feel a certain way about a certain thing just because we see it differently.
Absolutely, and we're powerless to do that. We don't, the only control we have is over ourselves and our own selves. And I think you've backed that up really lovely, because we are coming to the end of this podcast, Chris. But I think we've packed in a lot, as we normally do. And anybody listening, if you've got any queries, or even something you just want to reach out and get, and ask someone's idea about something, because, we all want to ask, that's how we learn, but we're frightened of what's going to happen. We don't want to make it public. So if you've got a question of anything, or you're having any doubts, or you want more information, where you can get more information for support, whether it be alcohol, drugs, whether it be for parenting, whatever it be, feel free to email us at breakingthecycle2stepforward@gmail.com. You'll find the link underneath the video and underneath the audio. Chris, your last thoughts before
I just wanted to share
a
positive story, really, or an experience, just a quick one, that I heard about. There was anger management, there was anger because of past experiences, and that anger was implosion and explosion, i.e. being verbally aggressive, not understanding why they were feeling like that way. It came to a head where if they didn't sort themselves out, that the children would be taken, or they would be removed. They wouldn't be allowed in the children's lives, because their explosions were upsetting the children and the family. So that individual went and had anger management classes, and when they could prove that they were safe to be around their children, then they were allowed back in. So basically, there was this impact, it was acknowledged, it was worked on, and then the family could move on in a safe way because that person then dealt with the reasons for their anger management, and the reasons was the childhood experiences. So that is just a way really to round up everything that we've spoken about today, that you might not be responsible for your impacts because you're not. However, you are responsible for the way that you turn up and cause situations for other people, and that is what you've got to deal with.
And I think there's nothing more beautiful than watching that happen, whether it be in real life, or I love watching real programs. And when I gravitate to those programs when you hear people having that courage to be vulnerable, saying, this is where I started. It's not about judging that person. It's like, this is who the person was. They're being encouraged, they're being honest. And then when they do get that support, and then the whole family get the support and come together, I just think, wow, what a life lesson you're giving to your children. You're giving your
100%.
children permission to say, wow, I don't understand this. I don't know what to do. And I think that's amazing. So I think that's a beautiful way to finish. Thank you, Chris. And we didn't script that. We always do this from the heart. We never know where it's quite going to go. So anybody sitting there now, if there's someone that's listening and they're thinking, I want to change something and I don't know where to start, send us an email. We're not saying we can fix it. We're not going to say we've got a solution, but maybe we can signpost you to someone. Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. And
bye, everyone, for now.
See you in the next podcast.
I can't find my stop button. Oh, where's my stop button? Record. There it is. Hello, everyone. Bye, everyone.